Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. This episode continues our series on famous Pennsylvania Dutchmen, and today we want to talk about somebody that everybody knows, and that's Milton S. Hershey. And if you don't know who he is, his last name tells you everything you need to know. Who in America does not know about the Hershey Chocolate Company? And we can proudly say that he is a Pennsylvania Dutchman. Milton Hershey's family came over to the United States, to Pennsylvania, in the early 1700s from Switzerland via the Palatinate. They were Mennonites, and his great, I'm not sure exactly how many generations far back it goes, probably three or so, grandparents that came over were by the name of Christian and Christian and Adelheid Hershey, and the original spelling of the name was Hirschchi, as far as I could find. Eventually, that was anglicized to the spelling of Hershey as we know it today. His ancestors came over with that wave of Anabaptists in the early 17 to mid 1700s, settled in Pennsylvania, of course, and practiced their Mennonite Anabaptist faith. They were Pennsylvania Dutch. Hershey himself was born in September of 1857 to his parents, who were Henry Hershey and his mother Veronica Snavely Hershey. And, of course, being Mennonites, Hershey was raised with that faith, and he grew up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. I don't know if he continued to speak it throughout his life or not, but, I mean, he spoke it as a child growing up. He was eventually, at a young age, apprenticed out to learn how to be a printer. That didn't really, he didn't enjoy that as much, but he did get to see how machines worked, and he would eventually work that into, of course, his business down the road. He then traveled to Denver to work for a local confectioner. There he learned how to make caramels using fresh milk. He took these ideas to try and start his own company. He started one in New York City in 1883. That failed. He then started a second business trying to make confections, caramels. That failed. And then finally, he started the Lancaster Caramel Company when he came home to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1883. He borrowed money from a bank, started this company, and it became a success very quickly. In fact, by 1890, just 7 years after the beginning of that Lancaster Caramel Company, he had already had a company that was employing over 1,000 workers with two different factories. It would be in the 1890s when he would travel to the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, and he would see and learn about chocolate. And it would be there that he had this then interest in this, what would eventually be his lifelong obsession with making milk chocolate. Brought this idea home and wanted to start making his own milk chocolate. He created a factory in what today would be the town of Hershey, Pennsylvania. He created the town for his workers, and of course there he would create the iconic Hershey bar, and in 1907 he would create the Hershey Kiss, which he himself named, and then his third introduction would be the Hershey bar with almonds, which came in 1908. His company and his factory would, by 1905, when it was completed, was the world's largest chocolate manufacturing company in the world. Of course, you know that it just kept going and going and going, and today, the Hershey Chocolate Corporation, of course, has over, well, and I looked it up, in 2016, they had $7 billion in sales in chocolate alone, which is, well, really, really crazy to think about. But let's go back to his life. In 1898, he met Catherine Sweeney, who was an Irish-American Catholic girl from New York, from Jamestown, New York. They met, they fell in love, and they were quickly married. Catherine died in 1915, rather early on in their marriage, and Hershey then never remarried. It would be during his marriage that they never were able to have children, and this would also guide Milton Hershey into his endeavor to continually look after orphan children, and he would create the Milton Hershey School, which is still in existence today, and that was a trust to have an educational opportunity for children of low means or of, coming from orphans. Another kind of small fact was that in 1912, Hershey and his wife had bought tickets to travel on the Titanic. They were in England at the time. But for whatever reason, they decided to travel home early, and they took a different ship, coming home a couple days before the Titanic would sail, therefore giving up his tickets. He was traveling, of course, first class at that point. I mean, he was an extremely rich man, well-known, world businessman. But luckily for the Hersheys, they decided not to take that trip, came home early, and he avoided the disaster. During World War II, the Hershey Chocolate Company supplied the United States Army with chocolate bars to send to the troops in their rations. And of course, this then spread the Hershey Chocolate Company beyond the United States. And of course, it is still today something that, I mean, Hershey bars are just so iconic. We can't think of America really without the Hershey bar. Milton died in 1945 in October of pneumonia at the age of 88, and today, of course, his name lives on in the company. There's also the Milton Hershey School, as we said, Hershey Park, which he built for recreational purposes for his factory workers. And still, there is some chocolate still made in Hershey, Pennsylvania, although they do now have plants all over. I don't know about all over the world, but they have plants beyond Hershey, Pennsylvania. And, you know, one of his hallmarks was the milk chocolate, and he was very proud of the fact that in the early years, the milk all came from good southeastern Pennsylvania Dutch cows, helping make that famous milk chocolate. So anytime you eat a Hershey bar or Hershey chocolate in its many forms, peanut butter cups, Kisses, Hershey chocolate bars, think about Milton Hershey, a true philanthropic man who gave a lot of money back to the community, and of course the Milton Hershey School. Someone who was seen as someone that really took care of his workers, that worked for his company, and a proud Pennsylvania Dutchman. I'm very proud to say that Hershey was a Pennsylvania Dutchman, and his legacy, of course, lives on every time you open one of those chocolate bars. Which I have to admit, I've had tons of European chocolate and chocolate from all over the world, and it's good. But there's just something about a Hershey bar that is home to me. And Pennsylvania Dutch, proud of it. So, a little bit about Milton Hershey and his legacy. Of course, someone that most Americans recognize that name. If you have an idea for a future video, please feel free to contact me at the email address at the end of the video. And until then, keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and Mox Good.